I think I've had this 4K of Close Encounters of the Third Kind for over 3 years now, but young Clark Teddles down in Australia has inspired me to take another look at it because he recently purchased the original home movie release of Close Encounters, the Columbia 400-foot reel that came out in 1978. So Clark is also planning to review the 4K of Close Encounters. I will leave a link to his channel in the description below, so keep an eye on what Clark is up to, and it's really good to see him getting into film and reviewing his films so much more thoroughly at such a young age. But anyway, my own history with the 400-foot Close Encounters does start back in 1978. It might have been early 79, but I was at an exhibition at Olympia called Photo World, which was an annual event then, and at the 78 or 79 Photo World, one of the stands had the 400-foot reel of Close Encounters running, and I was rather mesmerised by it. I'd missed the opening couple of minutes. I couldn't quite believe what I was seeing. It seemed like a very long reel to me, and quite amazing that something so recent in the cinema could be purchased and viewed in your home. How times have changed. Shortly after the Columbia 400-foot release, Cinevision released the original promo, the extended promo trailer for Close Encounters, and Cinevision, they had a special process whereby the original aspect ratio was retained. So this is around 2:4:1. Normally Super 8 is cropped top and bottom, so you have 2:6:6:1. So this was just like being back at the cinema to watch that promo reel. Unfortunately, this beautiful package suffers fade like just about nothing else on Super 8. Well, that's something you have to bear in mind with Super 8, because film stocks pre-1982, all film stocks 16, 35, 70, they were all prone to fade, and then in 1979 Kodak introduced low fade stocks, and these became the standard in 1982. So anything printed pre-1982, generally you're going to experience some sort of fade, but there are exceptions, and a lot of Marketing Films releases and Walton Films releases, they do still hold up very well today. VHS and Laserdisc releases followed those original Super 8 home movie releases, and I think it was the late 80s or maybe 1990 when Duran Film Services suddenly announced they had the rights to the full-length Close Encounters of the Third Kind for a scope release print. However, this was the special edition, so not quite as popular as it otherwise would have been, but sadly something went wrong and the rights were withdrawn after just 12 prints, I believe, were struck. I do have a friend in America who has one of these prints, and he does tell me it's fairly exquisite. So although I've never seen one, they are something rather special and one of the rarest full-length features ever released on Super 8. We have of course had DVD and Blu-ray releases in the intervening years, but with this 4K now we really do have something rather special. There are one or two flaws on this disc, but these were baked in from the day the film was shot, so you will spot one or two out of focus shots or slightly out of focus shots. A few other things where maybe the lighting wasn't quite right, and a few optical effects where there is perhaps a little too much film grain visible. But despite any minor flaws, this is another Steven Spielberg classic, and it was a massive success back in 1977 and 78. With a budget of just $20 million, it grossed worldwide an estimated $307 million. It did follow hot on the heels of Star Wars, which was a massive success, and some people at the time, I remember, were saying Close Encounters is just doing well because the world is ready for another science fiction, and Close Encounters is the first one. I think that's a little unfair. I think Close Encounters would have been a big hit of its own without that Star Wars influence, and just take a look at the film today. You can see there is something special about it. John Williams, of course, had done the score for Star Wars, and now Steven Spielberg was asking him to follow that up with Close Encounters. So he went from one film to the next, and yet again he came up with another masterpiece of music. How on earth does this man keep turning out such classic tracks that are so memorable and form part of cinematic history themselves? Nevertheless, he does it so many times, he's still going today, and he still is one of the masters. 2001: A Space Odyssey was still a major influence on filmmakers at this time, and I don't think Steven Spielberg was any different. And so he wanted to find the people responsible for the visual effects of 2001 to get them to do the visual effects of Close Encounters. Sadly for Steven, they were all in England, apart from Douglas Trumbull, who was based in Los Angeles, and he was approached to do the effects for Close Encounters. Fortunately, this man certainly knows what he's doing, and he pressed 65mm into action once again for doing the effects. The reason for using a bigger film format is for clarity of the final image. However, once again, the work Douglas Trumbull was doing for these special effects was groundbreaking, and so there are going to be the occasional flaws. So watch for the final composite shots when the actors are turning their heads to follow the spacecraft, because sometimes they're looking at the spacecraft over there and it's up there. But they were doing these things for the first time. It really was trial and error, and it's amazing things turned out as well and as realistic as they did. I've seen this film a few times on television over the years, and I have to say that the effects do look poor compared to how they look on the Super 8s. And that is because video is video. But with the addition of this 4K and HDR, which makes video look more like film, the effects appear to be back to their best. And I think this pack, more than any other, illustrates the advantage that 4K has over Blu-ray. Because you watch this film on the Blu-ray and the effects look fake. You watch them on the 4K and they almost look real. And that is the difference between the two. With 4K, providing you've got the HDR set right, you're getting a film-like experience in the home. But with Blu-ray, as good as it is, and it is brilliant, you are still looking at video. So, as I said, more than any other, I think this pack is worth looking at simply because it is such a good advert for 4K. Now, having said that, there is a bit of a flaw on it. It was quite an early 4K, I suppose, and the HDR on my system in here and also on my television is too bright, and the result of this is, as soon as you put it on, you see what looks like video noise, film grain, and overly washed out imagery. Well, that's because the HDR is too bright. Fortunately, with Panasonic players, they come with an HDR button, or most of them do, on the remote control, and this gives you the option of going between 4 brightness settings on the HDR without having to go into the setup of your player. And the lowest setting is standard, and then it's natural, light environment and bright environment. I had to set this on natural. It may have looked even better on standard, but I feared it might be a little too dark on that in places. So I left it on natural, and the contrast once it was on natural, so much better. The brightness was perfect. The colour was perfect. This, again, was just like watching a 35mm print in the home. And believe me, I run quite a few of those in here. So I don't think you can give it a better recommendation than that. This really is another first-class 4K release, but I expect some of you will be saying, no, it's one of the poorest because it's too bright, or there's too much film grain. It's the HDR, and if that isn't enough, turn the brightness down and maybe even the contrast down, and also if you're watching on a telly, turn your backlight down. And a lot of these backlights, they seem to have blue tints to them, so it's all things to bear in mind that what looks great on one system may not look quite so great on another, and what looks terrible on one and great on another might be simply because the settings are wrong on one system and not on the other. So there's a lot more to 4K than just sticking a disc in and pressing play. You really do have to think about this some more. So it's more like film collecting really than video collecting. Whilst the special effects are an important part of Close Encounters, obviously it's the characters and the story that really define it, and fortunately Spielberg is very good with children, and this young Carrie Guffey, who plays the adorable little boy in this, never acted before. I'm not sure he ever acted afterwards, but he's brilliant, and the reason he's brilliant is because to get his reactions, I think most of these takes with him were one takes, and he'd come onto the set to do his scene. Steven Spielberg would be up a ladder unwrapping presents for him and things like that. He'd have an ice cream, and so when you get these reactions from the boy of toys and ice cream, that's what he was responding to. There was another one where he's clearly got a bit frightened. That's because one of the crew members is in a clown suit, another one's in a gorilla outfit, and it really did make him take a step back. But it works. He didn't really need to act. All he had to do was respond to what Spielberg was doing to him, and it worked perfectly. And I think that's true of all the characters. They're all believable, they're all natural. There is the Nearys, the mother and father, played by Richard Dreyfuss and Terry Garr. There's one scene where they have a blazing row that isn't very nice, that isn't in the original version of the film, but it's in the other two. And I think the film is better without that. However, I can understand why Spielberg put it back in, because there's a couple of things just after that that don't really make sense without that scene, but I do prefer it without that scene in it. There is an option called A View from Above, which enables you to watch the film in any version, and it'll come up with little icons and snippets of information telling you how things differ. And so if you really want to make a study of Close Encounters, it might be worth watching one of the versions with that turned on. Right from the start, the film has a great air of mystery to it, and that mystery seems to maintain throughout the whole film. It is a fantasy, but I manage to get wrapped up in it every time and thoroughly enjoy it every time I watch Close Encounters. The sound on this one is DTS HD 5.1 and rather impressive, but more nuanced perhaps, and not like a bombastic modern blockbuster. I like it though. I think it suits Close Encounters very well. The aspect ratio is approximately 2.4 to 1. Overall, I think this is another fabulous 4K disc, and I can hardly recommend it. So poor old bank balance yet again. However, not all is lost, because quite often since I purchased this, HMV have had it on sale for as low as £10 in their 3 for £30 offer. So certainly worth keeping an eye on there, and I'm sure in other countries too by now you'll be able to pick it up as a bit of a bargain. So anyway, that brings us to the end. Remember to keep an eye on Clark Teddle's channel, see what he's got to say. I'm going to try and encourage him to do something increasingly professional as time goes on. So until the next video, bye bye for now.